Hello and welcome to the Nova Moon channel. My name is Ali and today I'm really excited to be sharing the third photo reading in my soul contract series where I connect to the energy of people I'm guided to and ask them a series of questions around their soul contract, what that meant, how they feel about it now looking back, and any lessons or observations they wish to share. Today's subject, as you can see, is British poet, author, playwright and critic WH Auden. So when it comes to reading photos, I don't pre-read or research any subject once I've been guided to who I will be reading for, and I stick with what I know, more often what I don't know. As I connect and then read, I find that my mind is a complete blank. I have no ongoing thought processes, nothing comes to mind or reminds me. I guess it's a little bit like auto-writing. So I let the energy come to me and I type it as it's being spoken or I hear it. Interestingly, for people who don't speak English, I often hear them speaking quietly in their native language and an English translation is spoken over that. So I hear the English translation in my own voice, but it isn't spoken as I would speak. It's a really fascinating process. Obviously, today's subject is English, so I have heard him speak. So, without further ado, let me tell you a little bit more about WH Auden. Perhaps not someone who you might have expected to be read for, and certainly was a surprise to me. But let me just give you a little bit of an overview from the Poetry Foundation. English poet, playwright, critic and librettist Phew Auden exerted a major influence on the poetry of the 20th century. Auden grew up in Birmingham, England, and was known for his extraordinary intellect and wit. His first book, Poems, was published in 1930 with the help of T.S. Eliot. Just before World War II broke out, Auden emigrated to the United States where he met the poet Chester Kalman, who became his lifelong lover. Auden won the Pulitzer Prize in 1948 for The Age of Anxiety. Much of his poetry is concerned with moral issues and evidences a strong political, social and psychological context. While the teachings of Marx and Freud weighed heavily in his early work, they later gave way to religious and spiritual influences. Some critics have called Auden an anti-romantic, a poet of analytical clarity who sought for order, for universal patterns of human existence. Auden's poetry is considered versatile and inventive, ranging from the tersely epigrammatic to book-length verse, and incorporating a vast range of scientific knowledge. Throughout his career, he collaborated with Christopher Isherwood and Louis MacNeice, and also frequently joined with Chester Kalman to create libretti for musical works by Benjamin Britten, Igor Stravinsky, and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Today he's considered one of the most skilled and creative mid-20th century poets who regularly wrote in traditional rhyme and metre. So why him? Well, as previously, I was guided to read for him when meditating. Now, I knew of W.H. Auden. As a teen, I studied some of the British poets for my English exams, but he wasn't one of them. However, I did read a few of his poems at the time, so when he came up in my meditation, I certainly knew who he was. Now, I don't always hear the voice of the person when I'm reading. For instance, I didn't hear Lady Thatcher's or Bob Marley's voices, but today, reading W.H. Auden, I heard a very distinctive accent. And I found out after the reading that he was from the place where I'd heard. Now, I don't know whether indeed he had a strong accent in real life, but it was distinctive enough for me to know where he originated. Now, I'm going to also say that he does have the face, and I am going to be told off for this, I'm sure, but he does have a face which I think is possibly of the area he's from, his very distinctive looks, if indeed someone can do. Also, is now the time to say that he was very tricky to read? Oh, well, it has taken multiple attempts to finish this channeling, and you'll see why as we go. I don't really know the purpose of connecting to him, of why he came through in my channeling, save to say perhaps it was about reminding me of being resilient and persevering in the face of a big fat no, and maybe also an introduction to his amazing, wonderful work for those who haven't heard of him. And if so, then this has certainly been worth the time, the effort, and trust me, a good few grey hairs. Okay, so first question I asked him was, tell me about yourself. And he had a lot to say. He said, I'm a cantankerous old bugger. It's a very English phrase. Difficult, firm in my views. I won't be lectured or spoken down to. I know what I think and I stand by it. Now, he said that he misses the Yorkshire of his youth, and that's interesting because he isn't from Yorkshire, or that's not where he was born. And so I wonder whether he did actually spend time in that part of the world. He said, should I say I like cricket? Don't all people from that part of the world say that they like cricket? I don't care for it either way. Looking at it now, I miss the Yorkshire of my youth, the hills and dales, the greenery, the tough stoic attitude of the locals. We'd help each other, perhaps begrudgingly, but no one went hungry or lonely if we could help it. I'm not so sure that happens now. I wouldn't want to live there now. So as I say, already we have a little bit of an issue because that isn't where he was born. However, that is absolutely what I heard. And I sense, therefore, that he must have spent some time in that part of the world as he was growing up. And I think that he really related to that way of life. Now, in the UK, we are the same as everywhere. We have views of how different people in different parts of the country behave. And Yorkshire is always known for very tough, very strong, very matter-of-fact people, but also very closely knit. And that certainly resonates on that front. So then I asked him, well, what would people know about you now? You know, how would they know of you? What would they know you for? And he said, I'm a celebrated writer and poet. My body of work stands for itself, a substantial body of work. My belief in what was called the left in my day. Where is it now? Somewhere on the right, mixed in with the far left, I'd imagine. Poetry. I was then and still am now against men being used as cannon fodder, as meat for those in power to prove points and make money. It's despicable, destructive and desultory in the main. I stood up for what I believed. I wouldn't be told I was wrong. Why should my opinions be wrong because they aren't someone else's? Groupthink is one of the most demeaning traits of modern society. And as you will have heard in the introduction from the Poetry Fellowship, they described him as someone who certainly was very clear on what they thought, who had very clear thoughts, very distinct is the word I'm hearing, opinions. And certainly, yes, I would imagine groupthink would definitely not be something that would appeal to WH Auden. And then I asked him, what was your soul contract? And then this is where it all started to go horribly wrong. My soul contract, he said to me, I'm still not sure I believe in things like this, but my job, as I saw it, was to speak on behalf of the ordinary working person who had no voice, held no authority. I could write, I was a wordsmith, so I used my writing as a way to put their voice across. I would sit in pubs and speak to older men, tough working men who knew nothing of the niceties of life, wouldn't have dreamed of living in the way I did, or how people do now. They were made of stern stuff and they worked bloody hard and often for nothing. Life was a struggle for them. And I took their experiences and their opinions and I gave them a voice that the higher-ups would accept. Not written in a dialect or using slang. They wouldn't have accepted that. No, he said, written words have no accent, in inverted commas, so the people making decisions on behalf of people with no voice can't feel too guilty whilst they're enjoying fine wines and champagne and expensive food, whilst ordinary people couldn't put shoes or clothes on their children, heat their homes if they had one, or feed themselves. But the people making decisions could read my work and feel better that they'd at least listened. Heavy on the sarcasm, you can probably hear there. It was an observation of society to help others to see what might be hidden or manipulated or skewed. He was very much about, as you can hear there, exposing what the world was like for the ordinary person in the street. He really didn't feel that those in power were in touch with the rest of the world. And I'd love to know what he might have thought about the world in which we live today, where those gaps have just got wider, haven't they? So he, as he said, really felt that his role here was to put the voice across of those who felt they didn't have a voice by using his extraordinary skills. So then I asked him, well, what impact then did this have on your life and your family? And he said, I had determination. I'm not sure that a man with determination such as mine is easy to live with. I drank perhaps too much. I shut myself away, but I loved my family. And my work enabled me to travel the world, to see places and experience things, and to meet interesting and unusual people. I then asked him, well, what was your biggest achievement? And after a while, he said, I was honest and truthful to my beliefs and my opinions, and I was clear-spoken and minded. Too many use smoke and mirrors, confuse. I refused to do that. Of course, he said, it's great that people have read my work, and I hope they enjoyed it and it educated them in something they didn't previously know. But standing by my principles in a time when my own personal principles weren't liked or accepted wasn't easy. However, I did it, and I can say that I lived a life that was mostly free of hypocrisy and double standards. I'm proud of that. I did what was needed at the time. We then had a couple of questions, which if you've watched previous episodes of this series, you will have seen, and he wouldn't answer those questions. As I stated at the beginning, feel that he didn't really, I don't think he really wanted to be a part necessarily of what I wanted to know. I feel there may have been other reasons for me being guided to interview him. Don't think he wanted to talk about a soul contract, so we didn't get answers to a couple of questions which were just more around specifics of what his soul contract may have included. But this question I asked him and he laughed. And he said, my soul contract? Let's use the term ambitions and purpose, shall we? Did I complete my purpose? I would hope so, and that's the best I got out of him. And so we came skidding to a very fast end when I asked him, okay, we've come to the end. Do you have a piece of advice or an observation that you would like to share? And he said, be true to yourself. Don't expect others to follow what you follow, but do expect them to be angry if you don't follow what they follow. That's okay. Let them. If you live as you believe and are true to your principles, you can say that's a life well lived. And I do feel that's a little cynical, but I understand what he's saying. And I completely agree. I don't know about you, that, if you live a life that is true to your principles, you can say that's a life well lived. I think I agree with that. And so my final thoughts on this interview. Well, he wasn't the easiest person that I have read for. I've read for many people. He certainly wasn't the easiest. He was one of the most complicated, wouldn't answer questions, wouldn't engage. As I say, it took multiple attempts to read to get all of the answers. But then if you look at the person he was, that's probably not much of a surprise. I don't know about you, but can you sense perhaps a little bit of affront? A little bit of, I'm telling you what I think I should tell you. And I ask you that question because as I was reading for him, I also heard the words or the phrase, should I say, CIA and security services on more than one occasion. And I suspect that he was of interest to the security services, both for his outspokenness and his stubborn ways, not yielding to power, not doing what he was told, in inverted commas, but what felt right in terms of his principles and his personality, the essence of who he was, and progressing his views on how society should be and how it should treat people. This included things that foreign and other governments might not have liked at this time. Well, that's what I wrote when I summed up the interview. And then I thought to myself, that was a couple of days ago, and I thought to myself, before I put this on my channel, maybe I should just check him out. And guess what? Yeah, he did have issues with the security services. Now, I'm not going to go in great detail here about what those issues were, and you may wish to investigate them more, but I think certainly there was suspicion that he was involved, colluded with spies, perhaps we can say. So he was on the radar of security services. So yeah, here we go. An interesting man. I think his message was really about being true to who you are, standing up for who you are, speaking out for what you believe, and living that clear life, as it were.